Solar energy is a development that has grown a lot in the past 20 to 30 years, and I'm going to look at the advantages as well as some of the disadvantages that are inhibiting the growth of this market. So in this presentation, I'm going to introduce the pros and cons, as well as describe three of my initial sources, followed by a short summary of what I plan to cover in my paper. There are a lot of obvious advantages that we know of with solar energy, the biggest being how clean the energy that is harnessed is. Other advantages are how once solar panels are installed, the energy is basically free since it's coming from the sun. It is also very long lasting because the sun is going to be around for quite a while. Another is that they are designed to require very little maintenance because they are self-operating. They are also able to be used for anything from solar-powered vehicles, lights, pool heaters, and houses. Some disadvantages of solar panels and energy is that they are very expensive to set up and install. The equipment is high-tech and new, so it's expensive for the time being. One of the largest disadvantages of solar energy is the fact that they are so dependent on whether or not the sun is out and shining, which in some areas is not very often. This picture also depicts how they're positioned facing a certain way and will only be able to capture the energy for a short period of time. They're also very fragile and can be easily broken due to debris or tree limbs falling, which can cause expensive repairs. Two other cons of solar energy production are the amount of space they take up in order to capture enough energy, and also if you want to store any excess energy, then it requires expensive storage devices. My first source that I am using is a research article that explores some of the barriers that are stopping solar energy from growing much more than it has. It states what the potential solar energy has in rural areas that don't have a lot of access to a lot of power grid lines that are more prevalent in cities and suburban areas. It's interesting to see how many barriers there are because this article has 3 whole pages where they are listed and described. These barriers include high investments in installing them, high taxes on importing the materials, and the lack of skilled personnel to install them. This source comes from a website called Energy Informative that is very knowledgeable on energy solutions and more particularly solar energy in this article. This source very much sticks to its name, solar energy pros and cons. There is a long list of pros which include the fact that it is renewable, sustainable, environmentally friendly, abundant, low maintenance, and also silent. Some of the cons include the fact that it is expensive, storage devices are expensive, the sun is very intermittent, they take up space and require very specific materials. This source is an informative paper that talks about the energy crisis throughout the world, which includes the rising prices of fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal. It also mentions how much energy is required more and more each year due to population increases and the increased production and technology of our world. This paper also touches on the fact that renewable energy, such as solar energy, is not going to be able to fully replace power plants because they are not as reliable since they're weather dependent. But they will help reduce the amount of emissions and lower the amount we rely on power plants. Throughout my paper, I plan to include a background on solar energy and how it is incorporated into our technology and power grid. Then I'll spend a majority of the paper looking into the good and bad things, as well as some of the barriers the technology is facing in this world. I'll then conclude my paper with my opinions of the potential of solar energy and whether or not I think the positives will outweigh the negatives.